Be the best. They say the commissioners say they can't do anything. Like in ordinance. How can they do? How can they do? Probably, it was where it's. But counties, zoning, even in the think of the most remote part. Yeah. It depends on the county. Whenever I can't get that way, yeah, I tell them it's very sensitive. They didn't pass anything. The people back in 5 years. Ed Lewis, Tim Taylor, yeah. Laughlin, the people that I worked with. So anyway, I need to look at some of those big slightly things. I would share with you guys why you need to 2,507 acres of contracted council. Small points for one. Yeah. And they don't care about
Everybody hear me out there? Getting things set up, getting a rambunctious, crowd's getting anxious. Not expecting any violence. Doug Fowler here, Pulaski Talks. Welcome everybody to the show. Broadcasting in hostile territory. So everything seems to be going swimmingly. Are we needing some music or some need some dancing? I can dance for the camera until Bill gets set up. I don't know how long it's going to be. We're at 5:59 now, so hopefully it'll be soon. Just holler at me if you need me to come up there. I'm not shy. 50% chance I'll make it. Getting rank bushes here. Crowd's getting settled in. We'll start working, broadcasting when Bill's ready.
Did I do that right, Doug? Okay. Thank you guys for coming out to our town hall on data centers. I think we'll start with Pastor Pat, leads us in prayer to start the meeting.
Father God, we thank you for this time of gathering together. Thank you, Lord, for a community that wants the best. for the community and the people. Thank you, Lord, for representatives like Bill that have a heart for the people, the community, and for your heart. And that's what I wish for, Lord, and I pray for, and I know we all do, that the will of God be done in our lives. And we just ask you to direct and instruct us in this meeting tonight, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Pat. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I think we're going to have a really good discussion. I'm going to give you kind of my thoughts and my impressions and things that I'm hearing and things that I'm personally thinking about and see coming on the horizon with the big tech companies expanding data centers throughout America, really, and a lot in Missouri. I appreciate it. We started with prayer. I said that before. As I try to figure out what to do, I'm somebody who reads history a lot. Lincoln said that. I've been compelled to my knees where I felt like I had nowhere else to go. So I believe that, if there's an overwhelming problem or any problem, it's good to ask God for help. And that's something we can learn from history to do that. And I've said that at some meetings where people go, well, I don't believe in that. And I say, well, it's okay. It's the United States of America. We got the freedom, but that's something I believe in. That's something I do. And I think that the problem with artificial intelligence and how much things are going to change, and the problem with data centers coming to rural Missouri is a big, complicated problem. And everybody I talk to has a little bit different spin on it. And sometimes I'll talk to people who they're big companies, they have a totally different spin than farmers I talk to. There are people who are on the far left of the political spectrum and the far right of the political spectrum, and they seem like they have the same concerns, right? And so I'm listening to that. Before we get going, I kind of get into it. I just want to thank everybody who helped us tonight, the staff. We got Laney, Robert, Marcy. These folks are amazing. They're organized. And let's give them a big round of applause for setting the chairs up now. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention your state representative, Jared Peters, who does a great job for Rolla. She's right at the back, and Jared's back there. Welcome, Jared. Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, let's keep going. We'll go to the first. Yeah, we'll start with the quick stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about sort of what I think, an attorney by trade. I'll talk about kind of legal background and an engineer officer in the Army, so I can talk about a little construction stuff. And then as somebody who studies a lot, so I can tell you kind of what I see as I'm studying and go over that. And then when I'm done, I won't take up the majority of the time. I'll just kind of go through some slides and give you some thoughts, let your mind kind of think. I'll give you my opinion about what I'm concerned about. And then what I really want to do is what I think the job of the legislature should be to do, which is for each of you to get a chance to say, here's what I'm concerned about, here's what's on the horizon, here's what I think about the world that's changing. And so you can participate in the process. And then us, the state legislators, that we're listening to you, and the policies that we implement are based on what you, the constituents, are telling us. That's really important. And an issue like this,
I would ask that you explain first what the ostensible values are of these data centers and why they're going to be so spread out.
okay. Yeah, give me a second. I'll go. Absolutely. We'll talk about that. So, and just like that, we want to hear your questions, but I also want to hear what you think that's not working and what's not right. There are a lot of people who are very upset. And I think it's a mistake for people in government, people in big corporations, to not listen to people and understand and listen to why they have concerns. That's one of my big concerns and why I ran for government in the first place, is that everyday people just get run over and trampled on and not listened to. And I'm trying to change that a little bit by having this town hall. Because you've got policymakers, you've got community leaders in this room, and we're going to have a discussion where we can, take what you say and bring it back to that part of policy. So so start with the context of what is a data center. Some people say data center. 20th century, there's a guy named Claude Shannon. He invented this thing called information theory. And information theory reduces all information that's conveyed, whether it's audio, visual, concepts, writing, into a bunch of ones and zeros. Right? So every idea you can think of, any concept, anything you communicate, there's a way to express that through a series of ones and zeros, right? It's information theory, binary code. And so when you watch something that comes to the satellite on your TV, or you see a signal that comes into your cell phone, or you FaceTime your grandkids, that's all information that got translated to something else that's recognizable in your brain. And we know that information has expanded more and more because everybody's got their stuff back up in the cloud. Because the data that your phone is processing, the metadata, there's just more and more data being collected on all that. And I'll talk about one of the concerns I have is just not just that, it seems like what's being collected on everybody's phone, that's increasing more and more. So there's this huge advance of all this information about every single person, their communications, what their business is doing on the internet, where they're making phone calls from, their movements now, as part of data is being collected. And then simultaneously, there's this demand created by the capacity for the rise of artificial intelligence. And a lot of people now use artificial intelligence, especially students, especially business people. They're using Grok, they're using Claude, they're using ChatGPT. And all of that information that computer program that you're putting in there, it's getting smarter by learning from it. And it's also taking everything everybody's saying to it, and it's putting it into this vast information of like our artificial intelligence understanding. So it has more capacity to do things as time goes on, and it collects more information about everybody who's typing in there. So it's not just like what you were Googling, it's also the conversation people are having with ChatGPT, which they're like, how do I write this paper on the Civil War? I'm having trouble with my relationship with, my relative. What advice do you have? How to make my business more profitable? Not everybody, but more people are using that more and more. And so, the sophistication of that model changes, and I'll go through this real fast. It changes so fast that what that computer system could do a year ago, it could do 100 times now. And then in 6 months, they would do 100 times more computing power in terms of what it can think, what it can process, how it can learn about people. We did, there was an experiment in the legislature last year. People were asking ChatGPT to characterize the personalities of people in the House. And they showed it to me. And what it did is it went through every Facebook post we've ever made. It went through every floor speech I ever made. It went through every media, which reminds me of also newspaper back, with every media comment I ever made. It took all of that, and then it analyzed my personality, everybody else's personality, just in a few seconds. So in a few seconds, that program went through a whole person's lifetime, almost whatever they thought, and said, this is what we know about this person. And it's actually pretty scary. Because that demand drives more and more. And so there's big tech companies, primarily Meta, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. And they're creating these big houses of storage that have the capacity for artificial intelligence to gather this data, to have this processing power, to create more programs and bots that do activities that will replace humans in a lot of jobs, but do all kinds of things that can be programmed to do all kinds of things. And they just collect all this information on everybody. So that demand is increasing more and more. So something weird has happened over the last year. All these big tech companies are pushing as fast as they can to go buy land throughout the country, or in some cases we want to talk about, get land through eminent domain, take land from people without their consent, and then put these processing centers, these data centers on there, right? And that demand is up right now. And I can tell you that even in our area, there are farmers in Lebanon who kind of told me about that. They had been approached by some big data companies about buying. When I was in Lebanon last week, in Phelps County, down the road in Pacific, Crawford County, of course, Montgomery County, of course, Kansas City. So it's something that's happening. It's coming to rural communities around Missouri, and that's kind of why the demand is driven. I'm not so happy about it. I'm opposed to what's happening. Opposed to what's happening to our farm. I'll tell you the reasons why. But the argument for that is that this will facilitate this AI revolution. It'll solve all these problems. It'll solve medicine. It'll make your life easier. It'll solve everything. It'll solve math. That's the argument for it. And so, and I'll just distill this to what's happening. What's happening is there's a farmer who has land, and if the land's not being taken by eminent domain, which should never happen, in my opinion, a big tech company will come and say, we'll offer you $20, $30 million because we need this 10,000 acres, right? And that farmer who's having trouble, it's hard to be a farmer anyway, that farmer who's having trouble staying in business, seeing if their kids want to take over the family farm, has a multi-million-dollar payout. So that, I'm not blaming that person, right? But they're like, here, sell. And then the data center comes up, and it has all these impacts for people that we're not talking about: environmental, safety, what's going back in the water, what's the water supply, light pollution, the noise pollution, the radiation that comes off the facility that affects people, right? People say you don't live under power lines. It's like that times a whole bunch. And then I'll make a point this too. We don't know in 5 years and 10 years if that data center is going to be relevant. Just putting money back in the community. But you've lost that farmland. And so the point I'm making is there's a lot of contractors, a lot of developers, a lot of local people, a lot of farmers who are like, I can make a whole lot of money now. And there are also a whole lot of county commissioners in the state who are like, we can bring billions of dollars into our county, right? And that's their perspective, and there's a lot of pressure for them to do that. Because property taxes, all these costs are like, oh, it's money, we need money. But in the long run, are you affecting the health of your constituents? Are you hurting their health? What about property rights? And what about your neighbor's property rights? Not to be by that. And then what about this whole AI takeover that we're facilitating and we're kind of letting happen without any guardrails, without any protections for everyday people? That's kind of a quick overview of what I think the issue is. So let's go through, we'll start right here. So this is the law. So this, I'll talk about like regulatory framework. And I'm glad that we talked about this town halls. Recently, the legislature passed Senate Bill 4. And Senate Bill 4 was one of those bills that had a lot of things in it. It has some stuff that I think is not good in it. And one of the things is the law used to say that a utility company, utility provider, can only charge for what rates, what you used energy-wise, and then billion. And it was forbidden for a utility company to charge users for future construction costs and future projected usage. Well, last year in Missouri legislature was and that enabled utility companies to look ahead and say, we think this is the usage for energy. This is the construction cost for building a power plant or building a gas plant that is required to facilitate a data center. So just by way of example, Ameren says if there's one data center in Ameren, that'll take up more electricity than every existing customer of Ameren combined. The Pulaski County Co-op told me that one data center in Pulaski County takes up more energy than 7 times all their customers combined. So it's a massive amount of power, right? So one concern I have is that we change the law to say we can take that cost. It's lawful now to take that cost and project it back on consumers. So do I think that your utility bills are going to go up in the next couple of years? I absolutely agree. Right? And people argue about, well, this will slow it down, this will, but your utility bills are going to go up because the demand for energy has gone way up. So what causes price? Driving price. The demand is going way up through data centers, through increased usage, through more AI, right? The AI that has electricity requirement, there's a hunger for electricity. But the supply is not increasing, right? You have supply strength for petroleum, there's Venezuela, the Strait of Hormuz, there's bottlenecks, there's developing refineries in the United States. We're not increasing the supply, but we're increasing the demand. And so that naturally causes cost to go up. The only way to drive down price is to increase the supply, increase competition or something. So the projected use, that's a problem for consumers. That the utility bills can go up for construction costs or for estimated. And as I'm going, I'll say one thing that I would change and had a bill to change it is to replace that law, go back to the field law we changed back to. Utility companies can only charge you for electricity that you actually use. So when the month's over, whatever kilowatt hour you use, that's your bill. There's many things we could do to drive this. There's one simple. Just make it so you're not being charged for future usage. And everywhere I go, people appreciate that. That they should be charged for electricity they're using, not what the projected future power is. Because one problem with the data center is you might project your future power usage, your costs go way up, and then in 5 years that data center is obsolete because of the rate of change. And then the county and the city and the locals are left holding the bill for something that was very expensive, but they're not even reaping the local benefit, or whatever benefit there was. That's a problem too. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is what we started talking about. The utility law was changed. Keep going. Senate Bill 4. Keep going. Okay, so that's a little bit about electricity. I could go into how to generate electricity, but nobody's here. Water. So water is a finite resource on the earth, right? There's only so many hydrogen molecules and so many oxygen molecules. Okay, so why do you need water for machinery, or why do you need water to cool something that requires electricity? Well, because of friction, right? At a power plant, there's friction of pieces hitting each other that creates heat, and then even just electrons passing through a conduit creates friction from the electrical energy. Now, is there any engineers here tonight? Okay, good. Now quit talking about engineering. What kind of engineer are you? Okay, good. And I can talk about electrical engineering. No, okay. It's friction, right? Okay. So even like while your power cord gets hot, that's because the electrons going through there create friction in the conduit, it gets warm, right? And so you need a source to cool that down. And now we'll talk about the use for water. Keep going if you don't mind. Okay, keep going. So when I was at interesting, I was at Command General Staff College studying strategy about 10 years ago. And they said in the future, wars will be fought over these resources that are finite, energy and water, because it's always going to be, it'll be in demand, especially as AI revolutionizes everything and crypto. What the fights will be about is who has access to water and what you do with natural resources and energy. And so it seems like every year there's a bill about, how water gets extracted out of Missouri and who gets to do that, who controls it. Here, the next slide. Kind of read through it, but this bill was a bill that talked about a permitting requirement for DNI to remove the water. And I voted against it because I felt like, one reason I felt like it is you shouldn't have to have a permit to take water off your own land. You shouldn't. But what I think it was doing was conveying more water rights to certain corporations to have more control over water. And so if I go around the community, I hear a lot of people talk about that. I heard people talk about this river supplies it, or riparian water rights. Talk to some technical experts, and I hesitate on this because I think the specifications for a lot of data centers are proprietary. And so how they're being developed changes all the time. So technical specifications aren't always the same. And some of those are secret. But some people who run the data centers say it's like a radiator, right? It's a closed system. And there's water in there that's purified because if it has dirt and minerals in it, it'll be corrosive. So it's purified, but then it adds in some lubricants. So there's chemicals, there's petroleum lubricants in there, right? Petroleum-based lubricants that go in there and kind of keep the machinery lubricated. So a lot of people have assured me there's no environmental problem, no water problem. But if I talk to my constituents who I'm trying to listen to, I've heard more people talk about, well, if it's exposed to the air, it's going to evaporate. If it evaporates and it has lubricants in it, are you putting chemicals into the watershed? Question. And I think if people ask that question, that's a very fair question to ask. What chemicals are you using? What chemicals are going into the water nearby? How are you assuring us that's not happening? That's a totally fair question. There's another question, which is, what's the water source that's supplying this, or how are you using that? And is somebody's water rights being affected? Is in some places where it's very arid in America, a lot of the voters there, the people there are really worried about water is always already a problem when we have less rainfall in Texas or in Arizona, something like that. So those are kind of two big issues we associate with. How is electricity being generated? And then here's a fair question two people ask, like in Lake Tahoe. If there's a problem with the electrical supply, does Google get cut off or does your house get cut off? And just judging by the response I have, I think most of you feel like that the government would protect Google over protecting your house. And that is enough reason just for us to intercede to make sure that people aren't being trampled on by big tech companies, for example. Because the one truth that we learned in the legislative process is that almost everything's driven by money and power. There's a money side and there's an anti-money side. And so if money really does control our government, which I think in a lot of ways, unfortunately, it does, so why do we trust that these big companies that have all this money and supplying billions, that you're not going to be treated fairly compared to them? And so we really need protections in law for people who aren't getting, pushed out, trampled on by the fusion of big government and big corporations. Okay, keep going. Then another issue was that the person who gets the permit is defined as a corporation, partnership, public utility entity. So people, and these bills, people drew attention to that because we're conferring rights and permitting rights to companies over people, corporations over people. One thing so I'm not against free enterprise or making money. Man, I'd love to make some money one day. I think everybody should be prosperous. I want you to be successful. I want you to have a business. What I'm against is there's a big company and it writes the laws that favors them and the government backs them up to the detriment of everybody else. That's what I'm against. I'm against a company that's so cozy with the government that we're using government power to give them what they want. And then regular people don't have a chance. That doesn't seem like a good system to work. Next, please. Okay, keep going. We talked about that. Okay, now I just want to know hyperscale data centers like warehouse, enterprise data centers, within businesses, coalition data centers. So somebody talked about what data center could be used, can be put in a trailer truck. I've heard that. A data center technically could be, technically there's type of data center in the laptop, right? There's information being stored on there and ones and zeros, electromagnetically, right? So technically there's some data being stored there. But there's also 20,000 acres that completely change the landscape of where a lot of us live in rural Missouri, It's because I like the green grass. I like the green trees. I like the fresh air. You know, I don't want to live in an industrial wasteland. And a lot of people in rural Missouri feel that way. And a lot of people feel like, okay, okay, you could do it, we want to do it here because there's a profit motive for us to turn our land into that. You guys know Elon Musk said that if the communities keep rejecting data centers, local communities, he's just going to send them into orbit and make them into satellites to build the orbits. So those companies had determined no matter what, they're going to drive forward with data centers, right? They made up their mind about that. And now I'll just say it was, and I think people maybe are listening to me. I thought about whether I should say anything kooky sounding, but I just kind of decided I'll go ahead and let you guys know how crazy I think that is. And let the chips fall where they may. So I think personally, like there's flock cameras everywhere. And I've talked to somebody from ICE and they were talking about flock cameras. The flock cameras, did you guys know this? You guys know the flock cameras? The flock cameras, do you like them? Virginia, you're gonna put you on spot. I don't like them either. There's something we agree on. Cool. So flock is a corporation. And you have something to say from that with us?
I have a request.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job. I like it. You've got some good information. If it wouldn't strain you too much, if you can raise your volume 10 or 15%. I need it. I don't know how many else need it. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying, if you could be a little bit louder, I would appreciate it.
No, that's good feedback. I'll try not to yell at everybody. Can you hear me now? No, I appreciate that. I will do that. Is that better?
Yeah.
If I stand right here, is that okay for you, Doug? Okay. So Flock is a private corporation. Some years ago, the state of Missouri agreed to get transportation money to agree to let the Flock cameras come up around Missouri. And there was one here and there, and they have facial recognition software and license plate, right? And then over time, it seems like there's one at the Casey's in Dixon. There's one at the Lowe's over there. You go to, is it dflock.org? Go to dflock, and you can see, .what? .me. You can see where all the flock, and it's reported by local people. They go, here's a flock camera here. You can see it, they're popping up everywhere. Now, some people say it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And the tricky part about that is that the Fourth Amendment's only violated by the government. So if it's a private corporation and it's on private land, that person gave them money, it's hard for somebody to sue and say my Fourth Amendment rights are violated because it's technically corporate action, it's private action. But here's what's another wrinkle to it. It's on a private land, it's collected by a private corporation, but all the information is given to the government. Because I tell you right now, the federal government can tell wherever you are at any given time. Not only that, and this is not conspiracy theory, this is true fact. They can tell where you are when you drove by it, who was in the car, and they could go back in time. And they could say, where were you 2 months ago on that data? There is a surveillance network of cameras around the state, and it's monitoring where everybody's going. And that is being fed to the federal government law enforcement agencies. No doubt about it. Now, here's my question. Is all this capacity that we're getting, this is one example. I'll give you 100 examples. Here's one example. Is all that computing capacity we're getting and storage capacity we're getting a record of where everybody in the United States is driving, for example? Probably, right? Probably. And so there's so much information. There's so many phone calls people are making. There's so many things people are working on for their business or for school that there was just too much information for anybody to weaponize against you. But AI comes along and all that information can suddenly be made sense of. And we can weaponize against that people who are enemies of, the political enemies of the government that exists, against whomever. The point isn't who you're weaponized against. My point is that shouldn't be weaponized against you. So we have this true surveillance that we're kind of going into. With all the information on your phone, all the information when you're driving, what you're doing, there's no way to escape it. And at the same time, we're having more authoritarianism, but we're using corporate power to increase government power. And what's the consequence of that? I think that people are just going to be controlled, used to control the population, like in China. When China you create the social credit system. But that's not a made up thing. In China, they have a system where if you're a good citizen, you get to have more privileges as a citizen. You say the right thing and do the right thing. And you are, being a good steward, responsible, and you do more stuff. But if you criticize President Xi too much, if you're an irresponsible citizen, your ability to, the business goes away. Your ability in some cases to fly an airplane goes away because your store is too low with the government. And that's what China does right now. And so, I'm a conservative. I've talked a lot of length on what I think that means. I think one definition I think it means is that the government doesn't lord over me or have the right to tell me how to live my life. That all men are created equal, right? So there's some stuff the government can't do. I'm a person. That's one definition of conservative. We limit the power of government. But we're in an era where we're giving the big tech companies and government so much infinite power. And very few people are talking about that. And that's a concern to me, right? So that's something that if I get to stay in elected office, and I may or may not, it's up to people. If I get to, that's a major priority of mine, is not stopping business or progress, but protecting the rights of people and their humanity, keeping like the technology to be weaponized against people and trampling on regular people. It's a huge priority, man. Okay, keep going, please. These are places where data centers are popping up over the country. Next slide. Talked about freshwater. Here, I kind of wanted this in the most recent presentation. I won't go too much into technical specifications. Here's why. Because I think a lot of the actual technical specifications are trade secrets of some companies, right? You can't get the blueprints. I think that's true. I think that the actual technical specifications will continually change as technology changes, and technology is changing faster than ever. But just suffice it to say, right now there's a huge power requirement. There's a significant cooling requirement, and there's concerns about how that power is stabilized and what the rights of the people who live around are. So, for example, under no circumstances, this is a position I have, under no circumstances should your farmland be taken by eminent domain. It's like in no circumstances should your home be taken by eminent domain. The seminal Supreme Court case, Tito versus Euegen, 2005. That case, there was a development in Connecticut, and does anybody know the corporation who was taking the land, developing the land? Pfizer is a corporation, my old nemesis. So Pfizer was the corporation, and they were buying it as a holdout. And the guy said, "No, you can't have our land." And the city, the local government, took the land, and they gave it to a private corporation. And so Cato Institute and NAACP, all kinds of different groups, you don't use it on the same side of the lawsuit, they sued on behalf of the property. And they sued New London, which was the city. And so the Constitution says that property can't be taken for public use without just compensation, meaning that's like a highway or something. Not you take my land and you give it to Pfizer. And the Supreme Court narrowly ruled in favor of the development of the city. And the holding, which is a terribly wrong holding, that holding said that public use was basically, is there some public benefit? Is the economy being spurred on? Is there more revenue being spurred on? And that's a totally erroneous ruling, in my opinion. So just like the legislature, just like the governor, just like the president, the Supreme Court doesn't always get it right. They're just people who are giving their opinion. It doesn't mean they're always right. That's a wrong opinion, in my opinion. So, but that was the state of the case law, is that a local government can take property and give it to a company and say they're going to do better use of it than you are. And that is the essence of the problem that I have. It's the force and power of the government uniting with the profit motive of a corporation to completely abrogate an individual's rights. That is a reoccurring problem that we're not talking about. It's one thing if there's a free market. It's a totally different thing if we're using the power of government and the favoritism of government in terms of funding and tax credits and tax cuts. The favoritism of government to say you get to be successful, but everybody else, good luck, right? We're just going to monitor where you drive, right? That seems like a big problem. Does anyone think that's a problem? Am I totally crazy?
You're not.
I'm a little bit crazy. I really am a little bit. But that seems like a huge problem to me. And this is part of the reason why, like, why are you doing this? It doesn't make any sense. Because who in the world would want to go through this to run for Senate for $37,000 a year? It's because it's like, it's a lot of grief, right? But it's because we are at a time when these issues matter. And somebody's got to say, hey, that's not right. And somebody's got to have the fortitude to be like, we're actually going to turn the tide on some of these things that are a problem. And so that's kind of why I'm having this discussion with you guys. Next slide, please. I used to teach, by the way, this is not to your benefit. This is by way of explanation. I used to teach college, in case you can't tell. And somebody would ask me a question in this class, and I'd go on for like 30 minutes. And it was a flaw that I have, and I recognize that. So if I get too bad, just rein me in. Okay, keep going, go through water. We talked about that. Someone talk about the national security aspect of it too. So last year we went to the White House. We had a trip to the White House. And the energy secretary was, it was amazing to meet the cabinet secretary. It was amazing. The U.S. energy secretary was talking about that the AI everything. AI was everything. AI this and AI that. All the energy is going in developing AI. And at the time, I didn't get why he said that. And then, Will Stark was there, had a good discussion. Hopefully not, the good discussion why it was so electricity was the big thing about AI. And now I get it better, that it requires a whole bunch of electricity to fuel it. When I was at CGSC, I told the story before. One of our problem sets was we were like, if we have to fight a war against AI, how do you do it with the army, right? It's not active duty. And I was at my house and I was like going through all the, like what to do. And my son Josh was, how old was he at the time? Josh would have been, he would have been like 8 years old actually. Josh was 8 at the time. And I asked Josh, like, what do you think about it? And Josh said, Dad, just cut off the power source. And I was like, you're the smartest person in the world. I was like, it has to have electricity, right? So, but now what we're doing, we're creating all this apparatus, all this electricity, and there's no local veto. That's the problem. There's no human veto for what's happening. It's just got to run amok and do its own thing. And some companies and some governments are going to control it. But that seems like a big disparity of power between those companies and those governments and you. So we talked about that. We said, what's the big deal with AI? Aren't you afraid it's going to change? It's already changed what people think and how their brains work. It's already changing the way, how reliant people are. If they can write, they can do math, like all that's already changing. Aren't you concerned about that? And also, are you concerned about if it's weaponized against us? And the administration's position was, other countries are developing this right now too. And it's getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So if America doesn't, then China's just going to wipe us out, basically. That was the point. And honestly, as a national security guy, that's a compelling argument. That if we stop it here, another country will do it. I have to listen to that argument. But that argument doesn't mean to me that we need to do what we're doing, which is like destroying our farmland and creating this surveillance apparatus over American citizens and having literally no privacy and no liberty, the direction we're going. Like, I think those are still very valid arguments. But that was an interesting point of view they had, that it's just getting smarter and smarter and smarter. And so, and one thing that you can read about this, it's an open source study that I've been told, is that by 2030, the project of next year, artificial intelligence will solve all math problems. Every math problem could be solved by, right? Have you heard that, David? You haven't heard that? And I was at a conference in March, not missing votes, but I was missing votes at the conference. And they brought it up at that conference too. They had these models, and they said all math is going to be solved within a year. All math. So that's very strange because my brother spent like a decade working on his PhD in math. He spent like a decade trying to solve one math problem, right? Which I told him I solve hundreds every day. I really thought this, but he was trying to solve this one math problem for like 10 years. My brother's Sam, so super smart. AI is going to do all of that in the next year. All the problems we haven't solved. That includes encryption. So the data on your phone is encrypted. The data that's stored in the police department is encrypted. The data your computer is encrypted. Your iPhone encrypts it. Signal encrypts it. What's that? There's encryption for what's there on servers. Every government server, every hospital server. If encryption is solved, that means that ubiquitously, any computer system will be able to hack any other computer system in the world. And the technology we have today, nobody will ever stop it. That's one reason why the Pentagon is so spun up on this. It's that AI is going to solve all encryption. But what does that also mean for you? That means that your life isn't your own life, you said you know it. And I guess is one reason I wanted to do this tonight is I wanted to hear from you what you thought about that. Doug.
Great example. I asked AI, what questions should I ask Bill?
Yeah.
Who gave the tax incentives to the big companies, and how much were they?
We did.
How much were they?
I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot.
We've lost $77 million in tax revenue so far to date.
Yeah.
And did you vote for them?
No, I was against SB4.
Okay.
But it's a true story. I was going to vote no, like the original no, but they closed the board before I made back my hands. But I was on record as no. The reason why I was against it was primarily the equipment. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but what stood out to me a lot was the equipment that you could be charged for projected future usage. And that you can probably tell I have serious concerns about what we're doing in general. But that was a controversial bill. But no, I was opposed to that. I did not support it.
What's that number? 10 people, all the company business, 10 people to establish the plant. They get a tax exemption for 15 years.
Yeah,
You can imagine.
yeah, that's right. So you got to think. I mean, something to think about, and I'm just trying to be realistic here. Is whenever a lobbyist comes and talks to you, somebody's paying that lobbyist, right? And by the way, to all the lobbyists listening, I'm not saying like you're not saying you're bad people. I'm just making this observation. Like there's a lot of information to learn from people. Everybody's got a perspective. I think you should listen. I'm just making an observation. There's that much money in the person who's lobbying. There's that much money in the political donations. There's that much money in whatever. So in order for a business to decide to do that, does anybody own a business? For a business to invest millions, that means that the rate of return has to be greater than what they're investing. So what's the government giving that business back in terms of tax incentives, in terms of appropriations? And who's paying for, but this is why I was against the state aid bill. Who's paying for the tax incentives you're giving to those companies, the specialized tax rates? You guys are. Because you're still paying your taxes. Right? So you're paying for, so who's paying for it? You guys are paying for it. But unless Jeff Bezos is in this room, Mark Zuckerberg, you guys are paying, right? So if you are, great, good job admitting that stuff. That's cool. It's not my point. The point is that well, the way we're treating people is super unfair. Because all the loss and all the liability, and all the risk of it, and all the harm, and all your freedom being taken away, and all the costs of people who are working. And by the way, somebody gave me I got a campaign donation today. And the guy was talking, he's like, hey, we're construction workers. He goes, we sit there and we work all day, it's blood, sweat, and tears. We thought you were good to us. And I go, thank you, I appreciate that. Like, it wasn't bad, you know, well, I think it was a bad thing. He was just like, you treated us good. And he's like, but what you know, we're construction workers, and it's hard for us to earn this money. We used our blood, sweat, and labor. And I was like, I appreciate that. There are people who work and they're striving and they're struggling and they're being crushed, you know? And those are the people I'm not talking about. Yeah, thanks for that one. Okay, let's just keep going.
Like the video?
Let's do the video. You guys want to watch a couple videos? Probably done to us to be talk. Okay.
I hope it's loud enough. Sorry for the one from the back.
This is a cold water pressure in the kitchen. This is where I fill up water for storage. Those are the things we have to fill up to flush the toilets.
So you can see the sediment from the data center. Wow, and that's just from the water coming out of your faucet.
Yeah, and this is what's in all the pipes.
Just the wheel itself is probably 20,000.
Yeah, and
All the places, the fixtures and pockets, toilets and the lines that come underneath the house. It's overwhelming because you really feel like you are up against this huge wall that you can't penetrate. There's nothing that you can do, and they don't care.
I'm here in Mansfield, Georgia, driving by Meta's new 2 million square foot data center facility. Facilities like this are being used to power things like ChatGPT and other AI tools that are becoming integrated into our daily life.
Data centers going to be a very hot item.
This entire supercomputer is built to power Grok. We see data centers as the most exciting asset class. Meta is building a 2 gigawatts plus data center that is so large it would cover a significant part of Manhattan. But data centers come with big costs, from light and noise pollution to the environmental impacts, to the potential rising costs of energy bills. These facilities put extraordinary demand on the power grid and require entirely new infrastructure.
They should be responsible for that, not us.
Search the internet for profits that Meta has made, Amazon, Microsoft. They can afford to pay for their own generation.
We came to Georgia and asked 2 questions. What is the true cost of the AI revolution, and who should be paying for it? Your house is here, and the data centers right there.
It's less than 400 yards.
Beverly and Jeff Morris bought their home an hour's drive from downtown Atlanta in 2016, but their roots in the community run much deeper.
Being in the country has always just been my peace and my therapy. When we found this place, we decided that this was it. It was perfect.
I was actually raised 5 miles from here. I'm home.
The data center that's now the Morris's next door neighbor happens to be owned by Meta, the company you know for Facebook and Instagram, but has also been breaking into artificial intelligence. They started construction on this data center campus in 2018.
Definitely changed everything. They've destroyed the environment, taken down all the trees across the road.
Beautiful pines, beautiful forest.
The light pollution is.
You don't have to have a night light in the house. You can walk around the house at night and see everything.
This is a video of the dust from Facebook where the construction was. Out my front door. The wind blowing in all of this stuff from across the construction, across the road.
It's all
Yeah, I was standing on my front porch. I think eventually that affected our well water. We're on a well here, and we started having issues with our well. In 2018, I had to replace the hot water heater. I've replaced 2 washing machines and a dishwasher because of the sediment that's coming in.
A lot of what the Morrises are facing is from the polluting effects of this massive construction. But that's only one part of the story. There are serious costs to communities once data centers are operational too. To explain that, we have to back up for a second. I wouldn't blame you if you were asking yourself, what the heck is a data center anyway? Their origins date back to early, clunky supercomputers or mainframes in the 1950s and 60s. And then in the 90s, with the birth of the internet, the modern data center was born as a way for internet providers to connect businesses and the world to the web. In the 2010s, data centers became larger as they became critical to new cloud storage.
I'm glad we share a sync photo that allows us to all work on the same documents.
Everything from your pet photos to entire workplaces to files for video streaming, like this video you're watching right now. We're in the cloud. Today, we are in the midst of a tectonic shift in processing needs, as large as the birth of the internet. Artificial intelligence.
A transformational moment for data center demand.
Okay, let's do the art video. Is that good though?
Yeah.
So much more I'll talk about it. Now,
I bet that was AI.
AI
That last one was AI.
that video,
Oh, that last talker was AI.
For context, this is a video of Josh Hawley speaking with RFK. Josh Hawley is kind of leading the questioning of the whole data center movement federally. So this is him having a conversation about the health risks when it comes to the data centers.
Being built in the United States, over 3,000 are already in operation. When I go home now, I get asked all the time by people who are big Maha people. I get asked constantly about the health risks around these data centers. And I honestly don't know what to tell them because I don't know what the science is, but I just want to rehearse this for you. I'm going to show you a picture of a data center. This is in North Kansas City. I mean, these are massive. This is going to consume, I think it's 700 megawatts of power. That's enough for 300,000 homes in 1 year. But I get asked constantly things about electromagnetic fields. You know, this is like having these data centers, like having multiple high voltage transformers all located in one place. Is that an increased cancer risk? I have people in my state who worry that it is, who are now living next to these data centers. They worry about decibel levels causing things like headaches, migraines, vertigo, other neurological disorders. My question to you is this something that HHS will study to look at the potential health effects here so we can get a handle on what is a health risk, what's really not a health risk, so that we know what we're dealing with when we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of these being built, not just in my state, all over the country.
Yes, sir. And I just want to say that I've litigated on this issue. We produced over 10,000 studies for the Court of Appeals, and I won the case to get FCC redo its regulations on EMFs. And you're right, there's a range of injuries that are very, very well documented. They're neurological, very, very grave neurological injuries. is a risk. And then just the making the blood-brain barrier permeable so more toxins can get into the brain. The risks to me are horrendous. And but we are, I've asked both ARPA and the Surgeon General's office to either do meta reviews or to do base studies on this issue so that we can better inform the American public. For more
When RFK came on as health secretary, somebody said to me, why is RFK Jr. a big conspiracy theorist? Which, by the way, conspiracy theorist just means wait a couple weeks, right? So they said, why is he a big conspiracy theorist? And I said, why is RFK Jr. a conspiracy theorist? Have you ever heard the story when he was talking about, because he was a little kid when his uncle was assassinated. And he came home from school after John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And at his house, his dad was the Attorney General of the United States at the time, Robert Kennedy. And the CIA director was there at his house. And his dad was confronting the CIA director, asking him if he did it. And that's like one of his formative memories as a little kid. And then, of course, his dad was assassinated after the president a few years later. So, of course, RFK would be a little distrustful of the government. Don't you think? Like, it makes a lot of sense to me that he would be a little skeptical of big elite power structures. But he made his living as a litigator, and he talked about that. And way back in the day, I never taken physics classes. They talked about when your cell phone's up by your head, which I try to be good about. It's part of his job. But if your cell phone's up by your head, there's a bunch of radiation coming off your cell phone, right? And the cells in your body are held together, same like anything else, a positive and negative by energy, right? And the energy is messing with that. There's definitely a correlation to that in neurological things, no doubt about it. And the cell phones we have now put out more electricity than they did years ago. The new iPhones so about that. And so if you have a power plant, essentially, or a power generation plant, how much electromagnetic radiation is it putting off? And what's the range in which that's safe? Have you guys ever been like, by a power line, you can hear it? You can hear that. You can hear that energy coming off of it. It's audible pretty much. The electricity going through this. Well, how many more magnitude more times is a data center? And what's the health risk to the public nearby? And so identifying that, people identify that, and I've had a lot of pushback on this discussion. People go, well, you guys are conspiracy theorists. You just got to trust the government. Everything's going to be fine. Well, I mean, I work in the government. You should not trust the government, right? You should ask questions. You should love your country and question your government all the time. Okay, I went a little long. I was talking a little long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop in that part of the discussion, and now I just want to hear from you guys what you have to say. And I want your opinion. I want what you're worried about, what you're mad about, what you think we should change, how to fix it. And let's want to hear from you, and then we'll conclude the discussion. Ma'am, I saw your hand up.
Okay, I'm 77, and last month I got my first smartphone.
Yes.
And I'm not very technological. I spent 25 hours with my husband just trying to go through everything, set things, and study the manual and everything. Okay, here's my question. When I have a desktop computer, and by the way, I haven't made my first phone call or anything like that. I got it here. Anyway. So when I go to search for something on the web, I avoid this like the chat room and stuff, but doesn't that take you also to these data center AI or something if you search for some subject?
So they say, like we'll say, there's information that's not being stored, but it seems like we have a lot of storage capacity for something. So I would just tell you probably your information is being stored somewhere. When you're talking to on the chat function or when you're searching. And then for a period of time, you're searching, it's definitely subpoenaable by the law enforcement by subpoena, but it's probably being stored somewhere. Now, who can access that? That's the whole problem with encryption, whether that's safe, right? It's completely deleted, but it's probably being stored somewhere.
Can I avoid using AI?
Yep.
Can I avoid it?
And this is why this talk is so risky to me, because now AI knows about it. Now that's a problem. But right, the Russians, they have went to making everything in paper, like they did in World War I, because they recognize that, and the technology that we know about just like the stealth bomber really came out like in 1978. But nobody knew what it was back then that existed. And then the stealth bomber was so widely available, like in the 90s, people knew about that. That technology was 20 years existed, 20 years before, 30 years before the public knew about it. The rate of change of technology is so much faster. So the point is, the Russians probably know that other countries have capability of doing things that nobody can even imagine. You look at the Iran attack, look at Venezuela. American technology is way different. American technology now in Iran and Venezuela is as different from Iraq War One as Iraq was from Vietnam. Times whatever technology. So they're just using paper. They're not going to put things in text by emails, but like they're not putting things in emails. This is who everybody can read it. So so even if you turn your phone off, you're probably not sufficiently stopping your phone. Yeah. Put your battery out, if the phone's different now, then you do that. So if you're by your phone, you're probably being recorded somehow. You could be recorded somehow.
They can do this.
So the FBI record put that sticky over his laptop about 10 years ago. That was 10 years ago. The FBI record put that, said I won't have a laptop with a camera on. Somebody can hack it and watch it.
Same thing with your TV.
Your TV too.
They can watch you.
So the technology's been, for about 20 years, the technology's been existed that can record you and watch you. It's smart to use your phone. It just was too much data for anybody to use. But now we have AI and all that data can be used. Yes, sir.
So a Faraday cage would stop it.
I think it has to, right? Faraday cage stops electromagnetic radiation, stops the waves. Yeah, Faraday. Faraday invented the process for generating electricity in copper and iron and magnets, right? Yeah, I think that's right.
Why don't you tell everybody what a Faraday cage is?
Well, you're probably better at telling than me, so go ahead.
Well, you could take a modern phone and put it inside a foil bag that has no cracks or crevices in it, and the signal can't get in or out. That's what I understand.
Yeah.
And you could put your phone in one of those Faraday bags and turn it completely on or off, however you want to do it, and close that bag up, and then try to call that phone with another phone, and it won't ring.
Because we'll have you.
It can't get the signal inside the bag.
Yeah.
So that's the only way that I can see that a lady like this, fine lady, she can turn that dang thing off.
Or just have it away from you. That made me think of the episode of The Office where Jimmy goes to store your phone and Dwight moves his phone off the roof. You see that? Yeah, really. Yes, sir.
I have a question. The data center is your focus, but the preliminary step is solar.
Yes.
Okay. So I was very active this past year with my wife, testifying at the state, or the utilities committee, the energy committee, and the House and everything.
Yeah.
All right. And I heard stories that were terrible. All right. And you didn't want to talk about that about lobbyists, but I'll do that with you later on.
Sure.
Okay. So all the stuff here's where I want to go. One of the big arguments would come back to you. They would throw it in your face, and they would be people that call themselves conservatives. Well, it's just like on your card here, property rights. You'd have somebody, you're trying to, I've been working on petitions, knocking on doors, and I don't want anyone to tell me where I can build my barn. All right. So how do you deal with that argument that we can't tell people what to do? My argument is, well, in rural Missouri, Marys County, there's rules about your septic tank.
Right.
Okay. You shouldn't be dumping it on your neighbor, right?
Yeah.
But I listened to these senators and representatives, and their argument was, by God, we don't property rights. We can't be telling anybody what to do with their land on solar.
So I'll give you an answer, but that is the same question we had like in the 1970s. We were industrializing America, and the EPA came on the scene. And I think there is a little bit of a balance. I don't want anybody to tell anybody to withdraw their property. I definitely don't want anybody to sell their property forcibly, period. But if you have a piece of property by the Big Piney River and you're dumping toxic waste into it and you're poisoning everybody else's water, then you're just not really exercising your property rights. You're hurting your neighbor.
I agree.
So, and there's also a thing in law called nuisance law, where like you can't play your music so loud that it shatters the windows of your neighbor. But if the person who I went to on the property, I couldn't say, They couldn't say, well, it's my land, I do whatever I want. And the difference is, that's John Stuart Mill's axiom, that your right to swing your fist ends at my nose.
Right, so.
So that's a good construction of what my consideration of property rights is. That's your property. But when you start to hurt your neighbor, right? When you start to poison the air or poison the water, or you're damaging your neighbor's property, then that's not exercising your property rights. That person has an interest in stopping
So,
you.
but they've been trying for 5 years now.
Yeah.
I only got on board this past year. It will suck you dry trying to fight, okay? Trying to convince the legislators about what you just said. And they've not been able, again, once more, for the 5th year, to pass anything that safeguards the interests of the individuals. It's not just the people who didn't sign a contract, even the people who signed contracts didn't know on the front end what they were signing themselves up for. Okay, they're ruining their own property, all right? Which is the community and agriculture, this whole thing. So we're industrializing rural America.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's no industrial rules. I don't know who the affiliation with foreign governments is, but all the developers are coming from Michigan, Colorado,
Yeah.
Texas, and they come here and there's no rules in Missouri. It's the Wild Wild West.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That is an excellent point. You go to an agricultural state and all of their environmental property rules are geared toward cows and pigs, right? Which were very sensitive to those farmers' rights. But the same protection that you'd have in some place like, Ohio and Pennsylvania, where those industrial places develop and they create all these rules for neighbors, those don't exist in Missouri. So you move the data center or whatever to Missouri, the solar farm, and there are no restrictions, right? That's actually a really good point. So maybe what we should do as a legislature, we can talk more about that. I'll talk more about it. Maybe we could parse out agriculture different than industrial rules and stuff like that. Yes, sorry.
Can you explain what this is?
This word, okay.
Follow-up is.
I didn't talk about it too much, but that's an example that all the town halls, people coming out, by the ordinance that the exterior toward Phelps County is different county classification, different rules. So if you wanted to go talk to your commissioners or talk to your councilman, you could say, here's an example of what you could do. Right, and the county took rules say, we don't want these data centers in our county.
So this is not from Phelps County.
No, that's right. That's just, because a lot of people say, well, is there anything you can do at the local level? Right, and it's like, well, there's some, and the litigation has yet to emerge a lot on data centers in Missouri. And then what counties can do and not do, because there's a new issue to get in the case law, we have new laws. But here's an example of something you can do if you want to say, hey, stop it. If you don't want them here. And I think that some people always go, well, this is a terrible problem. How do we address it? The main way you address it is by making your voice heard to your local elected officials and making it a key issue. Yeah.
And do you know if there are other counties in Missouri that have adopted this?
Camden has adopted a version of it. Camden has it's a different classification than Phelps. So they're gonna have different authorities because of the classification of county. But Camden did adopt the ordinance.
I went to the county commission today.
Here.
And asked them if they had been approached to put a data center in. Well, they said no. And I said, so if they approach you, are you for or against? Well, we can't tell them no or yes.
Yes.
And because we don't have the planning and zoning.
Yeah.
So is this, you're saying this is something if they apply it, adopt it, or do whatever, that would stop them from being sued?
No, it wouldn't stop any, so it wouldn't stop anyone from being sued. Because it's pretty easy to sue somebody. Right? You just write down a piece of paper and go file it and serve them their suit. Whether that's a valid lawsuit or not. So nothing really stops it from being sued. But would it be litigated over, be effective? Well, this example of, I think the counties should try it. If people in the county don't want it, they get a local government, they can try it. If they don't have a zoning ordinance, they can pass an ordinance like that. They're, like I said, the retired farmer, I'm not trying to blame that person if somebody buys their home and they got the millions. But it's the same thing with the ownership of land. China came in, they were offering $20 million for farms, and people were making rich, and that's great. I mean, about making rich, it's fine. But at some point you're selling that capacity, right? So that's kind of my point. At some point, you're doing what's in your best interest, but it's a tragedy of the commons because there's pressure to get rid of all this farmland, a lot of farmland. And throughout Missouri, big tracts of land are, including around our area, are being approached for potential developments of data centers because the demand is so high. And so just like that point was being made, you're looking to places where there's no rules, there's no building code, right? There's very little environmental rules, so it's very geared toward agriculture, which is a good thing in a lot of ways for farmers. But so build it here before the state catches up and starts to regulate it. I think that's what a lot of people want to do.
It's 2,000 acres, under contract in Mary's by the air.
Yeah.
Okay, and so in Ameren, we know people up there in Mary's County, my mother always said, they're knocking on their doors, trying to buy land. So that solar farm is the prelude to the data center.
Well, my dad used to say, they don't make any more land. Like we're not like producing more land. So the data center, if you build a data center, it's going to be a huge data center here. Like I already talked about, there's a very strong potential. It'll be obsolete in 5 years or before that. Who knows? You can't model it because the rate of change is so different, but it'll be obsolete. And you'll have a hard time turning that land back into usable farmland. But in 50 years, what is the biggest commodity going to be in America? It's going to be land where you can grow crops and have cattle and stuff like that. That's the most precious commodity. If you think about how we industrialize, what eventually becomes super valuable, the green becomes super valuable, right? As we further go toward the industrialized world. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, about the security risk. So when I went to the Capitol a couple months ago, we talked with the senator from Kansas City, and there's several data centers that are being built in Kansas City that are owned by Russia and China.
Yeah.
So how is that not an national security?
I think it's actually a huge problem. It's a huge problem that we're dependent on China for manufacturing, even our military is. Big problem. That was an American policy, some Nixon and Carter about, economic dependence, so we would war with each other. But what it turned into, we can't make anything in America. Part of it's our rules in America, that China doesn't have the same rules. Part of it, we create a system where China makes it and we buy it. So both our countries are codependent. Well, then when President Trump came into office and started a trade war, tariff war, and we also got to talk to the Secretary of Commerce about that, Howard Lutnick. Is anybody, talk about Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce? Quick story, and I don't always tell stories. We'll go quick story. On 9/11, Howard Lutnick, he was going to go into the office. He had an office with his friends and family. And his coworker said, no, take your kid to school. First day of school, more important. So he didn't go to the office. He took his kid to school. And then the plane hit and killed everybody in his office. And he's the Commerce Secretary now. And he's a really smart guy. But he had a really good discussion with us about how all these chips in your car everywhere, they're all made in China. So what's going to happen if we go to a conflict with China? China, we're dependent on them. They can shut off our military, shut off everything. That's a huge problem. It's a huge problem if, like, your iPhone is manufactured in China. You don't think that China has a source code for your iPhone? Because every corporation in China is a subsidiary of the government. Every Chinese corporation has to give the Chinese government anything the Chinese government asks for. You don't think the source code to your things developed in China is in the possession of the Chinese government? That's a big problem. We're doing that for those reasons, the manufacturing reasons, the codependency reasons, the ability to manufacture in America, but we have to, for national security reasons, not give other nations access to all the data, the back door, control, the ability to shut us down, ability to manipulate information. The fight about AI is also the fight about what's true. Because if you ask somebody, a lot of you know stuff, right, for your life. You know facts. And if you say a fact you'll tell somebody that, and they'll go, let me ask ChatGPT if that's true. You know what I'm talking about? It's a real phenomenon. So they'll go look at it. And they'll go, well, ChatGPT says you're wrong. And you'll go, ChatGPT's wrong. And they'll go, no, the AI is not wrong, but the AI is wrong all the time. It's just wrong all the time. Sometimes it gets things wrong. It's not that it can't be useful tool, it's just wrong. So if you think that program can tell you what's true, right? And then all of a sudden people are using that as a barometer for what's real or not. What's it going to say about religion, about God? What's it going to say about what political beliefs are right? What's it going to say about the COVID vaccine or whatever? People are going to go to it and ask for the answer. That's going to be the authority. And the authority, like people have PhDs, the people that whatever, and the people who are leaders, they won't be authority figures anymore. Everybody will go to AI. That's another big problem nobody's talking about. that answer your question? Okay, I think Virginia, yeah,
So when you talked about turning it back into farmland,
yeah,
it will take approximately 100 years to do that because the heat from building and solar sterilize the land down so far
yeah.
that for the minerals and stuff to come back to the surface, takes about that long. I moved from a state heavy on solar. They're finding that out now.
That is an excellent thought. You can't just take out the concrete and start growing crops. That's a great thought.
You can at a house, but you can't on something like that.
Yes.
So you made a point of obsolescence, and that is very true. I was in IT and started back in the 90s. What was true in 1995 in the need was out of date within 5 years. And 5 years is actually a really valid number out there. I am frustrated with our state that we have not met with guardrails like something like this. We saw it quite some time ago. Well, maybe we as the public did not know. The people in IT knew this was coming, and then and it's more, and it did because the people who make the decisions, the people with the money, and the people that do the building are three different abilities, and they don't communicate well. And so this is making somebody money, and they're going to talk really big and fast to the guys that are going to approve the payment. So we're getting systems that are kind of slapdash. I stood in so many server rooms, and no, they're not data centers, but and I've seen that they take that Cat5 port and then whatever's the shortest route and straight across, and it's not necessarily the most effective way where they've shoved a server in a corner that of course without the proper heating and cooling that we need because it was just faster over here in this one. And that's what exactly I'm seeing happening on exponentially larger scale as we're talking about the data centers. I guarantee you, we don't need this many boxes all across the country. And why is it on Phelps County to decide we're going to put the brakes on this? The state needs to have put some guardrails out. Sure, Phelps County by all means should. But darn well that there's a university over there and they do have a data center. It's just, they might not be big form, they will be in front of them. But data centers exist all over.
Servers are everywhere. The smaller scale servers are
everywhere.
So, I'm glad you mentioned the thing about heat. That's something they don't address. And, always an AI might kill us. It's not how you think. They're not going to launch all the nuclear weapons at once. It's not going to be kilowatts, because if anyone's a future on the fan, you know that kilowatts reach the limit, they automatically go. So it's because of how thermodynamics, where 100% of the electrical energy you input into the system is actually some energy.
Yeah,
and so you always hear people go on about global warming, about we need to control our carbon footprint and cripple our industry, but you never hear anyone talk about heat. I don't think that's totally emphasized for them. But anyway, so I actually wanted to, I didn't have to convince anyone here how bad the data side is. I'm sure you guys pretty much agree. I just want to speak a little bit on the knock-on effects. And so you guys know about the Georgia about the transmission lines. They did eminent domain and they seized several neighborhoods worth of homes to build this transmission line to at least 4 data centers. Then in Festus, I'm sure maybe you heard about, there was a city council that they recently voted out half the city council was in favor of the data centers. And then you mentioned a little about Nevada. Is that one about the Lake Tahoe?
Yes.
About if any of you don't know about that one, there's a town where in May of 2027, their power company has announced that they will no longer be receiving power to their utility company because it's going to go to a data center. And they're like, basically, good luck, go find more power elsewhere because we don't know where it's going to come from. And then in Saline Township, Minnesota, they decided that they did not want a data center, as well they should, And so a township of 4,000 people was sued by a $16 billion data center. And so because of that, they decided to settle out of court because they didn't have the money to fight it legally. And then another one in April in Indianapolis, there were shots fired at a city councilman's house who was voting to be in favor of data center. And so the other thing that we don't mention, which I think is very real possibility, is the risk of political violence as a result of this. And so it's hard out there. I work as an engineer, which is a very good job, and money is a lot higher than it should be. And there are so many people out there that move on right now. And there's 150 million people out there. It's a very infinitesimally small percentage of those that might push them over the edge. They have nothing left to lose, and they result to doing something extreme. Are you familiar with the concept of the overton window?
A little bit.
Yeah, it's, if anyone doesn't know, it's the socially acceptable range of political discussion. For example, a couple years ago, it was completely unacceptable, and the cancer will have to question the transition. Now people can question it, and it's socially acceptable. That's beside the point, it's just an example. But it's not necessarily just the case with political discussions, it's also the case with political violence. And so I think you could potentially see as a result of this, judges, election officials, politicians, city councilmen, lots of people targeting, just like back in Indianapolis back in, was it April? And then also, you mentioned about cutting the power to the data centers. That's another thing that I can certainly see happening. You have all these transmission lines going into the data center. Someone might say, oh, hey, why don't we take out a few of these transmission towers to stop power from going into the data center? And it would be wildly easy to do. The infrastructure in this country is so poorly funded, it's impossible. I won't go on because I don't want to be on the list. So, too late. And so,
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
All your identities are not.
And so, because of how our transmission grid works, I don't know if you remember about 8 or so years ago, there was an issue in Ohio where you had a power line short out and it cut power to approximately a third of the power to the country on the East Coast.
Yeah.
That's called a cascade failure.
Yes.
And except for Texas, which for some reason has its own power grid.
Yeah, and that didn't work out too well.
Yeah.
So
that's a bad idea.
once you see people who take action against these data centers, or against people, whether against infrastructure, nothing else to lose, you have a result of copycat effects similar to the Euegen Mangio CEOs, how many people go favor of that. And it's worth mentioning, 40% of people in the country were in favor of starting the American Revolution, which was to take violent arms against the oppressor. 71% of people in the country were against data centers. And so it's a very real possibility, and it's not emphasized enough. And if you push people too far, I guarantee it will happen someday.
Yeah.
We need to terminate.
So a part of what the function of politics should be is just to listen to people and resolve things non-violently, right? And just the people being listened to. But to your point about revolutions, how do you have a revolution against the government when you're on total surveillance of the government that you're doing? And if you can take cut the power off and shut down AI, know what happens if you shut down the power of a neighborhood or a business. They're just shut down. Most houses are totally, you just kind of shut down and electricity goes off. I can't, you're the way to ask the question.
Well, so
No, sorry.
here's the most important lesson that I learned from COVID. That the local city government and the local county commissioners can and should act as a buffer for poor politics coming out of Jeff City. And Jeff City should and can act as a buffer for poor politics or lack of good politics coming out of his city.
Yes.
So what I want to say to you is that if you get reelected, and I hope that you do 100%, But if that happens, what I would like to see you doing with your colleagues in Jeff City is building something that looks like using nuisance law and current data to keep these centers from doing exactly what they did in Georgia. Like, if they've got enough land where they can prove that they're not gonna pollute the water and they're not gonna cause neurological defects, like, whatever that bubble around them needs to be, they need to own that much land.
Right.
It's just that simple, seems like. And I'm gonna guess that, if we did something like that in Phelps County, that would probably keep them out of Phelps County. Just because they would have to purchase such an enormous amount of land, and it's not West Texas really has that kind of land
Right.
here.
So we should also have the ability to generate their own energy before it was not on here.
Sure, and I think that that's the point too. I mean, that the energy problem, it is a problem, but, I just think that, I'm disappointed that our county commissioners aren't here. Maybe they didn't know about it, maybe they're planning to go. Well, they didn't know, yeah, you were there. So, and maybe they are in the meeting, by the time they heard about it this morning's meeting. So I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but, they have in the past had an interest in bringing in tax dollars, exactly like you said. And that cannot be, like, what we need for our children and our grandchildren has got to be our top priority, not bringing in current tax dollars.
Right, it's short-term value, so long-term destruction.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
So, about a year ago, I went to the county commissioners and I said, what's the story with the block cameras? There's one just after you cross Mary's in Phelps County on Highway 63, and there's, you can go to the map on the flock website and see where they are. At least the ones that have been posted by the public. I said, and the sheriff happened to be there. I said, oh, good. I said, how do you get information from the block cameras that are in Phelps County? And the sheriff said they could query the data in the block system. And I said, do you need to have a warrant? And he said, no, but our personnel are all trained. We've heard stories on the block website that you read about, law enforcement tracking their ex-girlfriend and abortion.
Right.
Like that. So the Phelps County Sheriff is a customer for the flock camera data. Is government a customer for the large mega data centers data? And do they need a warrant? And is it discoverable for the average citizen to find out when they're querying this giant database?
We could do that this. So one, we can create even if the Fourth Amendment doesn't require it, Missouri can create a warrant requirement statutorily. And we can create a guardrail requirement that they let somebody know if they're looking at their data, that the watchers are being watched. Those are things we could do. There's lots of warrant requirements in Missouri statutes in addition to the search and seizure in the Fourth Amendment. So we could do that. I think that's a pretty reasonable first step. Is to go, if you're going to track somebody's car where their car was 6 months ago, maybe you go to a search warrant to a judge and say, looking for that instead of just a mass surveillance. That's a good point. Now, whether or not you need a warrant now, 14 minutes is a question, because it's not state action, right? All the rights and Bill of Rights are negative rights until the government not. It's a corporation development. But there are examples of when private action is subject to the Fourth Amendment. Entanglement, propinquity is the word that's used, but when it's so close. So in other states, people have sued on plot numbers, and there's ongoing litigation. And so in order to sue, though, you have to have standing, you have to be heard. Or you have to know that your rights were violated somehow. And if somebody identified that, they could file a suit, and we can litigate with the Supreme Court. But right now, the federal government and state government's argument is that's no different than if Pam took her camera and walked around, which by law you do, so you take a camera and walk around, film everybody, and then you wait and gave it to police. It's not a Fourth Amendment violation. And that's a problem because we're doing this on a huge wide scale. So at minimum, this is my opinion, at minimum, I can't figure out a way to ban them. We need to have, here's the judge you go to, you go look at somebody's data, and here's that the officer's not abusing that, to find their, and there's so, and more counties I go to, there's more examples of that. It's like the ex-girlfriend example, or whatever example, you were somebody who the government, that official didn't like, so used it against you. If that's being done on a general mass scale, right? It's a huge problem. And everybody's talking about the benefits, we can track kidnappers, stuff like that. I'm not saying that those benefits don't exist, but the point of the Constitution was that there's just rules about things that the government cannot do, no matter what. They can't tell you what your religious beliefs are. They can't take your guns away. They can't search your home with a warrant. And back then, I'll make this one point real fast, and then I'll go. Back then, the soldiers went in people's houses. They were critical of the ground. They went to the papers and effects. They took their musket, right? And the colonists were really upset about that. We don't have that anymore. Now we have what's on your phone. That's your papers and effects. We have your privacy in your automobile, in your own home. And the law hasn't caught up with technology to protect that. So yes, at minimum, I would file a law that says you need a search warrant to access the stuff. Yeah. Wait, sorry, go back to you.
What is your opinion on legislative? I mean, what is the group of legislative about this? What you feel or other things?
Well, so first of all, knowing that I predict what the people are thinking is probably wrong, giving my sense. I think a lot of people are figuring it out. That this issue came up faster. You know, it's easy for legislators to talk about what they think about, issues that have been certain issues threatened. But just like in COVID, when COVID came about, I did shut down and all the mandates. It took a hot minute to do a Republican Party. If you remember, to be like, we're against this. For a long time, the Republican Party was for mandates. The COVID vaccine mandate and shut people down, right? It took a minute to go. This is not the conservative position. This is like this little bit. This popped up real fast. And so everybody's like, oh, these companies, it's money, development, stuff like that, technology. It's going to take a minute, I think, for Republican legislators to go, we're hurting. People don't want this, which is, I think, what's happening. Right? I think what's happening right now. These town halls across the country, right? State. So,
I think that's my life.
I think, libertarians and liberals agree on a lot sometimes. And a lot of what they agree on is civil liberties.
My last point, the camel's nose under the tent. All right. Understand, we've been involved with something up in different counties in here, where now my little farm is surrounded by 2,567 acres of ground contracted to soil. All right. They sell it as it's free, it's safe, it's all this business, right? And that's how they get good people who want to do good things about the design of the environment. But those contracts get sold. They get sold. All right. And so I've listened to lobbyists say, oh, we only are going to do solar panels there. Then I go online and find out that they're competing for a permit that says solar panels and lithium battery storage. Okay. So then they sell that guy may say that to you, but then he sells the contract to another company who's interested in lithium battery storage. In themselves, it grows a threat on the environment. So now you get a data center that buys a contract who's going to have what? They're going to have lithium battery storage facilities. All right. So how they get to the data center is not straight away. How they get there is, this is Mark's opinion, okay? They get there by convincing people that you should authorize these gigantic industrialized utility solar projects. All right. They give nothing back except lease to the people who don't sign up. And then they just hand it off to other people. So that's.
And my picture too, are really quick. Keynote today announced $15 billion deal from Google to where are we at?
Moving forward.
Also, Erin Brockovich announced that she's highly interested in Missouri. So where are you at with that?
Erin Brockovich has a lot of good points about Missouri, about the glyphosate and the pesticides. There's a good point on that. And on data centers and radiation to neighbors, stuff like that. Erin Brockovich has some good points on that. There's a lot of Erin Brockovich Maha overlap. So. Yes.
Well, back to the $15 billion deal we signed today. What are we doing?
What am I doing? If I get back, I'll try to pass some laws. And one of it is solidifying the county's ability to say no, stuff like that. One of it is reversing equip change, future usage. Other things just about rules and stuff that could put the brakes on it. I would do that. The legislature is not going to go back into regular session until January. So they're operating under the existing laws right now, which is, that was a very astute point that we're kind of in the regulatory wild west. So it's just going forward. They're going to develop it. It'll take us some time to build it. That'll probably still be in construction for, next session, but it's going forward uninhibited right now. Oh, sorry, Bob. Who else has questions? That's the show of hands. What's that? What's that?
I think I have one quick follow-up with hers. Can the government, could the government call a special session?
Okay. You can go into the governor and the Supreme Court case on the maps, just basically said the governor can call an extraordinary session anytime he wants to. That's essentially their thing. And then the legislature can call itself a special session with 3/4 of both chambers. So if 3/4 of both the House and Senate want to do that, then they can bypass the governor and go back to second. Yes.
We're surrounded with a lot of federal conservation trees. What is, what would prevent them from coming in and buying that timber and clearing that?
They're not all these things. Yeah, no, it's another natural resource. That you can't, just like you can't make the farmland for 100 years. You're not going to go back and 50 foot overnight. And we, I don't want to get too environmental on you, but we need plants for oxygen. Right. It's very sci-fi. Sir?
So, multiple conditions, many of it, fortunately, solar, data center. If you look at those organizations, they have contracted. How long is it been? Deep knowledge, only about years in Senate, Missouri State Senate, Missouri City Legislature. They're getting paid some of their salaries for a reason, because their relationships with really, how do you combat that?
So some people say that's a negative side of term limits. The people come in, they're fresh, and they're like, I just want to pass the bill, I just want to pass the bill, I want to pass the bill. And somebody comes up and goes, I gotta go. And then they're using all the energy for that bill, right? I think that the way that I would say to combat it is for you guys to combat it. By electing people who say, here's what I will stand for. Here's what I will do. I'll pitch you first over them. And then not re-electing people who do that. But the government you have is the government that you've elected. But you have to get people who are just like, and that's the skill that I got. I don't really care if everybody likes me. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to make a lot more friends. I am like, I think that we're in a very rough situation as a country, and I'm going to do something about it. So I'm getting in the arena, basically. But I think these people who are not trying to make everybody like me, it's hard to be in politics. I know we got Doug and Karen. It's hard to be in politics because you wake up every morning with 10 people on Facebook saying you should die. You know what I mean? And you're like, what am I doing this for? And then you're like, oh yeah, that's right. There's like a big problem. And somebody's got to get up and stand up about it and actually be tough enough that when there's pressure on you, and that's one thing I got going. If there's a lot of pressure on you, you don't cave to the pressure. Sometimes I agree with the group, and sometimes I disagree. But it's because I agree or disagree. Do you have a question?
We just spent $2 billion sending the company to France by the administration to stop wind farms off the coast of the East Coast. Now, what's your position on wind farms in Missouri after what I understand, you're raising taxes on them?
Yeah, no, that's so similar to what was brought up. You have a property right component to put a window on your property. There's a regulatory component when you're affecting your neighbors, right? The issue becomes stuff like when there's a favorite of the government and they get the appropriation, they get the tax rate, stuff like that. And it's not people freely deciding it. So look, if you got land out there and you get land in Dixie, you want to put a window on your property and supply your power grid, more power to you. Don't do things that hurt other people's power grid, stuff like that, right? But we also don't want to get the government to be, especially the state. Does that answer your question? I'm a big freedom guy. I'm a big freedom guy as long as you don't hurt anybody else. And they're a big don't make money guy, just like the government should pay to be making money. Here,
So the city of St. Charles is an ordinance ban. The city limits.
yeah,
So it can be done. I find it very disappointing if indeed our county commissioners need to reaction when you have to adopt data centers, is to say we wouldn't prohibit them because of our concern is being reduced. Which to Gene's point was that was used very quickly to justify a lot of the shutdown and the others that were put in place during that time period that we now know didn't have to happen. They were living during the, and quite frankly, you know, we have to understand that this is going to be litigated at some point or another. So I do find it cowardly if that's the answer, that they won't even consider what their interest of the constituents are out of fear of being defeated.
I talked to some of the Phelps County commissioners today. It was a good conversation. I just said, I'm gonna try to do this, I'm trying to listen to people, and we can learn about what action to take. I don't think that they've made up their mind. I'm not trying to speak for anybody, this is my impression. They've made up their mind how they want to approach today's issue. But we're having a conversation now. So there's an ordinance, maybe they can try to adopt it, maybe not, maybe they have a different idea. But I think this next month, we go back to the commission meeting, we have a conversation.
Yeah.
That's what,
That's not
yeah.
an attack on our,
No.
you know, I'm not trying to attack our commissioners. But I do want everyone, we have other counties represented here. You know, if your commissioners, if that's their initial reaction, then we need to continue to have those conversations in our community, that it's something that we're concerned.
They're right that counties with less assessed evaluation have different authorities to actually evaluate. There are different authorities for ordinances for different size counties. In terms of evaluation. That is true. There also, I think there's a good point that this is a new thing. Counties have been trying to ban data centers before. So there's risk, there's litigation risk. There's regulatory risk, there's market risk, there's litigation risk. But my point is that we should be willing to take some risk to find them. Especially if the people of Phelps County say, hey, we don't want this. Then from the city council to the county commissioner, to your state government, to the executive branch, they should support your decision to keep those out. That's my point. When something is new, it's like the lockdown. And some states they sued and Richard Whitmer could have a lockdown in Michigan. But Neil Gorsuch was opinion to Las Vegas, they shut down church, right? There was a new thing, the litigation, it's different law. But you never even get to that point of litigation unless somebody pushes back. So go ahead and try it, push back if you're concerned. And then it's a fight you can fight throughout the next couple of years. Are you guys tired of hearing me talk?
You did a good job.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions before we go? One more question? Our brains are full for tonight. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask